Hello, and welcome to Genre Talk. Today I'd like to talk to you about the genre of a rhetorical analysis. Now, first-year composition teachers often ask students to write a rhetorical analysis. You're probably familiar with the term analysis. When you analyze a text, you are looking at the details of the text and interpreting those details. You break the larger, complex text into smaller components in order to highlight patterns and to come to a deeper understanding of the text. For instance, if you were looking at Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, you might summarize the text by saying, Charlotte Bronte spends a lot of time thinking about the moorlands. But if you were analyzing the text, you might write something like, Charlotte Bronte's heroine describes the vast void-like moorlands in order to illustrate her inner loneliness. If you're given a rhetorical context assignment, you might be asked to choose a text to analyze, and sometimes this text might even be multimodal, like a Super Bowl ad or maybe even an Instagram account. Sometimes your professor will ask you to analyze a specific text. And now if you're looking at a text like a speech, for instance, then that task might seem very similar to the task that was set in front of you when you conducted literary analyses in high school. And they are pretty similar genres. A literary analysis and a rhetorical analysis both ask you to include detailed descriptions from the text and then to analyze those details in connection to your claim. But to get a better understanding of what exactly you're supposed to do in a rhetorical analysis, let's take a closer look at the word rhetorical. Rhetoric is a fancy word coming to us from ancient Greece via Aristotle. It basically means the art of argumentation. So if you're analyzing the rhetoric of one of, say, Dumbledore's speeches, then you're making a claim about the art of Dumbledore's argumentation. This means you're not just on the lookout for Dumbledore's claim, for what he's trying to say, for what he's trying to convince his Hogwarts students to believe. You're primarily on the lookout for how he's trying to persuade them to believe his claim. As Mike Bunn puts it, a rhetorician, you're reading the speech like a carpenter would look at a table to see how it's been built. Let's take a look at one of Dumbledore's speeches, shall we? This comes from the Goblet of Fire. And note that we'll be analyzing this speech as if Dumbledore were a real, live, human wizard, not just the imagination from good old JK. This is just for the purposes of our thought experiment here.
Every guest in this hall, said Dumbledore, and his eyes lingered upon the Durmstrang students, will be welcomed back here at any time, should they wish to come. I say to you all once again, in the light of Lord Voldemort's return, we are only as strong as we are united, as weak as we are divided. Lord Voldemort's gift for spreading discord and enmity is very great. We can fight it only by showing an equally strong bond of friendship and trust. Differences of habit and language are nothing at all, if our aims are identical and our hearts are open.
First, you need to identify what Dumbledore's purpose is. Who is he talking to and why? It's what we call the rhetorical context. He's giving a speech after the return of the infamous Dark Wizard, Lord Voldemort, and the murder of one of Hogwarts' students at the end of an international tournament that was held on the school grounds. He needs to inform Hogwarts students and their international guests about what happened, and he also wants to encourage them not to be governed by fear. How does he do this? Well, first of all, he leads by example. Every guest in this hall will be welcomed back here at any time. And here he underscores his own sense of credibility. He himself will welcome back international guests, even amidst rumors and accusations about those guests. You might consider this an appeal to ethos. Next, he leans on logic. In the light of Lord Voldemort's return, we are only as strong as we are united, as weak as we are divided. Now this is a compelling, reasonable argument. He's not asking Hogwarts students to be kind to one another because it's the right thing to do. That would be an appeal to shared values, or pathos. Instead, he argues that being welcoming to one another will actually help protect their community from the dangerous powers working to thwart them. Dumbledore continues.
It is my belief, and never have I so hoped that I am mistaken, that we are all facing dark and difficult times. Some of you in this hall have already suffered directly at the hands of Lord Voldemort. Many of your families have been torn asunder. A week ago, a student was taken from our midst. Remember, Cedric, remember if the time should come when you have to make a choice between what is right and what is easy, remember what happened to a boy who was good and kind and brave because he strayed across the path of Lord Voldemort. Remember Cedric Diggory.
He ends his speech with an extremely emotional appeal. He calls Cedric Diggory's name out in particular. He asks students to reflect on their grief for their fellow student and to hold on to that grief particularly when they might be allured in the future by the power of the dark wizard party, or else tempted to ignore the party's real threat. Now that we've taken a look at Dumbledore's use of ethos, logos, and pathos, 3 different argumentative strategies, let's take a closer look at kairos. Now, Dumbledore knows that Cedric Diggory's death is what everyone has been nervously whispering about in the hallways. It's on everyone's mind, and that's because it just happened. He knows that, as headmaster, he needs to help his students navigate this difficult subject. And so he prepared this speech to inform them about what happened. But he doesn't just inform them. He doesn't just clarify what happened, does he? He also uses the opportunity to talk about Cedric's death in relation to the larger persuasive claim he makes that unity matters. Such a speech might not have been so captivating had he waited a year. And this is a savvy use of kairos, or consideration of the timeliness of one's argument. Now that we've talked a little bit about the genre of a rhetorical analysis, let's think about some tips for writing one. One thing that I think will really help you is if you use as often as possible the author's last name as a subject for your sentence. So you'll see that when I've been talking about Dumbledore's speech, I use his name, Dumbledore, as the subject of many of my sentences. Here's an example. Now, using that will really clarify who is speaking when, but you also need to do the harder work of analysis. And this is often clarified, your point is often clarified if you use a strong active verb in connection to the subject. So instead of just, Dumbledore is very gifted at thinking about time, you might say, Dumbledore shows consideration of current events when he blah, blah, blah. So here's a list of strong active verbs that you might consider using in connection to your subject. And note that you can often use a thesaurus to come up with just the exact right verb. So a synonym that might help illuminate further what it is that you're saying that this author is accomplishing with their text. These are my tips about writing a rhetorical analysis. Have fun.